All right, you guys, welcome back to The Brief. My name is Brandon and I'm your host. Merry Christmas. Today we have a very special episode planned. I wanted to go over this graphic that I posted a couple weeks back after Spotify released their Wrapped. I decided to take it upon myself to create Politics Wrapped 2025. And that is exactly what you can see on your screen now. We have five of the biggest stories from this year in politics. Starting off strong with number five, we have the immigration crackdown, which took place starting January 20th until the present day. And that is President Trump's main agenda. That is what he had run on in 2024. And that was to get illegal immigrants out of this country. And we have seen an increase of ICE raids across the country: Los Angeles, Portland, Chicago, New York City, all of it. And we also saw some intense protests, notably the protests in Los Angeles over the summer, and in the fall, we had the protests in Portland, Oregon. Now, something important that came from this was Executive Order 14159, which was enacted the day that Trump took office for his second term. And that is also known as Protecting the American People Against Invasion. It expanded authority for deportations and expedited removal without court hearings. It also limited funding for sanctuary cities, think Chicago. There wasn't one big law, although that was a big law. It wasn't just one big law. It was a series of executive orders and stuff in the Big Beautiful Bill and all sorts of things that led to this huge crackdown on immigration, and it's just escalated since he took office. And that was probably one of the biggest stories. That's why I put it at number five, was because it is something that has dominated the news cycle since he took office. Number four, we have the United States bombing Iran. So this happened on June 22nd of this year, and this was taking place during the Iran and Israel 12-day war, which happened between June 13th and June 24th. Now, this conflict was happening mainly because Iran was developing a nuclear weapon and Israel felt threatened by it. They were pressuring the United States to take action, and we did. We ended up bombing three key Iranian nuclear sites known as Fordow Fuel Enrichment Plant, Natanz Nuclear Facility, and the Isfahan Nuclear Technology Center. Now, the Trump administration and the Israelis said that those strikes from the B 2 stealth bombers completely destroyed and got rid of Iran's nuclear technologies. However, the intelligence community, contrary to that statement, said that while not destroyed, they were damaged. Now, a ceasefire ended up ending that war on June 24th of this year. Now, the third most important story, and arguably the most impactful to everyday Americans, was the federal government shutdown. It was the longest one in US history, between October 1st and November 12th. It lasted for 43 days, and the main argument on why Democrats did not want to sign on to the package to keep the government open was the fact that they wanted the Obamacare subsidies to be extended. And spoiler alert, they were not extended by the time the government reopened. The Democrats did fold, and that caused a whole nother rift between the Democrats. So around 900,000 federal workers were furloughed, and another 2 million were working but without pay. Um, of those 2 million workers, we had TSA and air traffic controllers who, again, were working without pay. If you recall from the shutdown in 2018 and 2019, that was one of the biggest contributors to the reopening of the government after a 35-day long shutdown. And this time, while it did contribute, it was still a couple of weeks after they started working without pay and calling in sick that the government was finally reopened. So Congress did pass a funding package on November 12th, like I said, without the subsidies that the Democrats wanted. It funds the government until January 30th, 2026, which does leave room for another government shutdown that could happen after January 30th, 2026. The second most important story to come out of politics in the year of 2025 was the Epstein Files Transparency Act, led by Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky and Representative Ro Khanna of California, a Republican and a Democrat. It required the Department of Justice to release all Epstein related documents within 30 days. So, passing on November 19th, requiring 30 days to release those files. December 19th was the deadline. And on December 19th, we did receive a trove of documents that included a completely blacked out, completely redacted 119-page grand jury testimony. Like I said, completely redacted. There was nothing in there, not even a title. It also includes photos of former President Bill Clinton with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And then another series of documents was released on December 23rd, which had a alleged letter between Jeffrey Epstein and Larry Nassar. Larry Nassar was the former team doctor for the women's national gymnastics team, and he was convicted of sexual assaults. That letter from 2019, when Trump was president, says, quote, "Our president also shares our love of young, nubile girls," unquote. The Department of Justice said that that letter was fake. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, the Department of Justice said that the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York uncovered over 1 million documents potentially related to Jeffrey Epstein and says that it may take a few more weeks to process and redact those documents. And finally, the biggest story coming out of this year, the most impactful, was the assassination of Charlie Kirk. He was assassinated at Utah Valley University on September 10th during the first Turning Point USA event from that semester. And a sniper shot him in the neck, and after a 33-hour-long manhunt, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson was arrested and charged. A memorial service was held at State Farm Stadium in Arizona, and among the 90,000 attendees was President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, who both spoke at the event. It was a true shock to the nation. I know personally I was shocked by this news, and it started more debate on political violence and rhetoric. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said Charlie Kirk's assassination made her think about her own participation in toxic politics. Take a look at that video.
But we have seen these kinds of attacks or criticism from the president at other people. It's not new. And with respect, I haven't heard you speak out about it until it was directed at you.
Dana, I think that's fair criticism. And I would like to say humbly, I'm sorry for taking part in the toxic politics. It's very bad for our country. And it's been something I've thought about a lot, especially since Charlie Kirk was assassinated, is that I'm only responsible for myself and my own words and actions. And I am committed, and I've been working on this a lot lately, to put down the knives in politics. I really just want to see people be kind to one another, and we need to figure out a new path forward that is focused on the American people, because as Americans, no matter what side of the aisle we're on, we have far more in common than we have differences. Yeah. And we need to be able to respect each other with our disagreements.
Thank you so much for joining me on this Christmas day. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. Stay safe, stay informed, and stay tuned.